I sprang it on them. I just said, hey guys, how many churches do you think there are in Liverpool? And they all sat there, sort of scratching their chins and thinking about it. And, one put up a hand and said, oh, is it 50? Someone else said 150. And so, it went on for a few minutes. And then eventually I just said, I'm sorry, guys, you're all wrong. There is one church in Liverpool, and we are part of it.
Welcome to Jesus in the Upper Left, where we're talking about gospel multiplication in the Pacific Northwest.
Well, hey, welcome back to Jesus in the Upper Left. We are excited to be here today. My name is Gabe Kolstad from Westside Community Church, and I'm joined by Tim Osborne. How's it going, Tim?
It's going great. Doing really well. Good to be back.
Awesome. And Tim's with Western Seminary and now Portland Seminary, and exciting days ahead. And we have a really special guest named Nick Harding, who's here with us from the UK, from Liverpool. Tim and I got a chance to go to Liverpool last fall for the City Reaching Summit put on by KX, and it was fantastic, not only in one of the most creative settings that I personally have ever been in my life, but also one of the most creative cities, and what a beautiful display of God's kingdom at work. Nick, it is a pleasure to have you in town, and thanks for joining us on this podcast.
Thank you so much. It's great to be back in Portland, a city I love very much.
Yeah, we had our fair share of coffee this morning around town and had a good time. Nick, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do with City Reaching there in the UK?
Sure. Well, City Reaching is something I feel very passionately about, driven by a real longing to see Jesus work through his church so that we can complete the Great Commission and anticipate his return from Matthew 24:14. This gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole earth, etc., and then the end shall come. So a real longing to see Jesus come back, a real longing to see the church complete the work God gave it to do, a bit like Jesus prayed in John 17, I've glorified you, Father, by completing the work you gave me to do. Similar, we want that for the church. We want the bride to be made ready, be made ready, or to make herself ready in the process of doing that. And so this idea of gospel saturation, reaching an entire city, every man, woman, and child, with the gospel in a way they can understand and respond to, in a way that transforms hearts and lives, families, communities, and ultimately a whole city. So we've been on this track for 3 or 4 years, and had some amazing conversations with leaders from different cities around the UK, about 15 to 20 different cities, bringing them together once a year to say, what would it look like to see gospel saturation take place in our city? What would it look like to have enough church plants from micro to macro to have one of these missional expressions of church for every 1,000 people? Mm-hmm. How would it be to actually work on that together and see the church, at least in our place, prepared for Jesus' return? That's the heart and longing behind it, Gabe, and lots of detail and sort of how we're approaching that. But the joy is that people are saying yes. And what's unique for me is that I've not heard anyone say yes to this kind of language before. So there's lots of collaboration around social action, around prayer, around pastors' fellowship times in all sorts of cities. Most cities and towns have a unity movement like that, but really no one is talking about the evangelism, the disciple making, and the church planting piece. And I'm excited to know that people are getting a framework for that. They're beginning to think about it and say, how can we mobilize the churches in our city to work together to that end? So that's the heart of it, Gabe.
Love it. Well, it's exciting to learn from you, and grateful to have you in town.
Thank you.
Nick, you just used words that we use frequently and we use often, and yet you're describing, and your face just lights up, and I can see it in your eyes, and pick it up in just your vision and your passion. You're experiencing things that we hope to get to, and we talk a lot about, but when specifically you just said evangelism, discipleship, and church planting, and it's like, for those that Gabe and I get to work with, and hopefully for those of you that are listening in, that's kind of where our heartbeat is, and our hope is to see more of that. Can you kind of just, maybe by way, I think of the words of both encouragement and exhortation of like, how can we hear what you're being a part of leading in the UK, and just as you described across so many cities and so many leaders that are hopefully we see as some of our next steps here in Portland and the Pacific Northwest as a whole?
Sure. Well, I guess the whole thing is built on partnership or collaboration. And that's been a long journey for us. I'll use Liverpool as the example because it's probably the most developed of all the cities we're working in, because I've been there for a long time and trying to work at this stuff over the years. Yeah. We've been trying to build unity, in my experience, for about 30 years. So that's a lot of cups of coffee. That's a lot of investment. That's a lot of, laughing and crying together and eating together. And I think for me, the turning point in Liverpool came where we recognized that as a church that had grown to be probably the biggest church in the city at that time, was starting to threaten other churches. And it's easy for a big church to remain separate, do its own thing, doesn't need anybody else, that kind of mentality. And a few people were starting to get a little bit angsty with us for a whole variety of things, some valid, some not valid. And I thought, no, we need to address this. And so I asked the church a question one day. I sprang it on. I just said, hey guys, how many churches do you think there are in Liverpool? And they all sat there, sort of scratching their chins and thinking about it. And, one put up a hand and said, oh, is it 50? Someone said 150. And so, it went on for a few minutes. And then eventually I just said, I'm sorry, guys, you're all wrong. There is one church in Liverpool, and we are part of it. And that became like a mantra for years to come. Every so often I'd remind them, I'd say, how many churches are there in Liverpool? They'd say, there is one church in Liverpool and we are part of it. That message began to get out to the other churches, and they began to trust us not to be trying to steal their sheep, not to be trying to go it alone. And that was one big factor. I think a second thing that helped us to break down those barriers was probably my own personal vulnerability. About 15, 20 years ago, very stupidly, I got myself and my wife into some really serious debt. And it was, we looked like we could go bankrupt. A whole backstory to that, which I won't go into, but I felt like I was cracking up. I felt like, maybe I need to step down from ministry, stop leading the church. It was a pretty horrible time. But I used to meet regularly. Out of all the leaders across the city that would meet together from time to time, maybe once every few months, there was a small group of about 6 or 7 pastors who I would meet with regularly just to pray for one another for no other reason. And I came to them that day. I was in tears. I was, I just didn't know what to do. I said, look, guys, I really don't know what to do here. I feel like, my world has come crashing in on me. And I feel like I feel like giving up, to be honest, because I feel like I'm such a bad role model to the church in terms of, stewarding finances well. And I feel so stupid for allowing ourselves to get into this mess. And you know what? And I'm going to start to crack up a bit thinking about it, but they just hung on to me and said, we're with you. We're going to stand with you. You're not giving up. And we're going to see you through this whole experience. And they did that. They stood with me, did not let me go. And it was humbling for me, but I tell you, it was bonding for us as a group of leaders. And that kind of vulnerability, which you don't see very often. Often we put on our best show, we put on our best face, we tell our best stories, and we all like to feel like we're doing good. We want to look good in other people's eyes, but it's not that counts. It's the vulnerability, it's the honesty, it's the authenticity. And so we began to try and build a culture that looks like that across our leaders' gatherings, and gradually, little by little, as I began to bring this city-reaching vision to them, we began to get some shared vision. I think a clarity around vision was also key. And I remember talking to them and just saying, look, guys, we've had this strap line for our unity movement. It's called Together for the Harvest. We've had this strap line for Together for the Harvest forever, which is that little script, a little phrase from Philippians 2:2, which in the New American Standard says, united in spirit, intent on one purpose. And I said, we've got to get clarity around our purpose. Otherwise, we'll end up doing unity for unity's sake, and that's going to take us nowhere. And so as the city-reaching language began to come into place, it gave us clarity around that shared vision. And as churches began to buy into that, it's also helped us to build collaboratively, because the outcome that we're aiming for together is really clear. And different churches will be at different stages, different leaders will have different strengths to bring to the table. And we want all of that. We're not trying to get cookie cutter churches, but we're trying to get a genuine collaboration of people, giftings, churches, geographies, because we operate across the whole of the city region, a bit like your sort of greater Portland area. So we're about 1.5 million people in the greater Liverpool area. We call it the Liverpool city region. And gradually, that shared language, shared vision has begun to unite us together, to work together for this glorious anticipation of the kingdom of God coming among us.
So can you, just two follow-up questions maybe, can you say again the vision, like if I, like what as you think of all these churches around your city region, Liverpool, like what is the shared language? What is the shared vision that gets repeated?
So two statements probably are the most common. The most long-standing one that everybody will get is, we're here to reach every man, woman, and child with the gospel in a way that they can hear, understand, I sometimes add, smell, taste, and see, and a way that they can respond to. And the second statement is, our goal, our dream, if you like, or we think it's God's dream, is that we would see in our lifetime gospel saturation and gospel transformation of our city region. And the transformation piece is important because it means we're not just around winning souls, we're around actually transforming lives, families, communities, workplaces, schools, universities, businesses, and the whole city ultimately. So it makes room for all of those expressions of the kingdom. But the sharp end of it is the evangelism, disciple making, and church planting.
I love that. It's so clear. It's so helpful. It's I can grasp it. It's there's things to hang on to in there that is real. I love that man, woman, and child can respond to. And the second question is, can you give us an example or two of like you mentioned maybe a larger church and your role in helping to kind of how God used you and your vulnerability even to kind of help build some momentum and next steps. But if I was, say, leading a small or medium-sized church somewhere in Liverpool city region, what would collaboration look like for me? Like, how would I perceive myself and tangibly be collaborating with the larger movement?
Sure. Okay, so there's a number of ways I can answer that question, but one of them would be, as people buy into Together for the Harvest, we're here to support, we're here to resource, we're here to convene, and we're here to share vision and to lead out from vision. So we're not in any kind of controlling organization, we're just a facilitating one. I think most of the smaller churches would say, we value being connected with other pastors because they can feel very lonely sometimes, and that's a huge benefit to them. We value resources, like we've produced a 9-week course called The Adventure, which is to help any church that wants to see its small groups turned inside out and become missional. So resources like that we're trying to make available. We also bring people into the city who we think have got a voice to speak into what we're doing. I think the most practical examples I can give you are around two relatively recent initiatives. One would be our church planting collaboration. And as I started to gather church planters, those who had church planted, those who were church planting, those who wanted a church plant, and just convene some conversations around, look, is there any way we could do this better together? Yeah. The thing that amazed me, Tim, was that we had every range of church imaginable. We had crazy Pentecostals at one end of the room, and we had really super Reformed churches at the other end of the room, all willing to have this conversation together.
Great.
Put aside secondary theologies in order to focus on the gospel as rooted in historic understanding of the scriptures and vision. And so we've been having that conversation for about 2 years, and I'm super excited. It may be a small start, but this September we're starting our first training cohort for groups of churches that want to plant churches or have just planted churches. We've identified a training partner. And partnership's a huge part of what we do, because why reinvent the wheel when there's people willing to work with you to do stuff? And so I'm very excited about that. That would be one way that a number of churches have connected. Another initiative would be our evangelism strategy team, and thanks to your very own Palau Association, have been really helping us. The UK team been helping us build evangelism teams in many cities, but particularly in Liverpool. And it was those fun moments where, put the feelers out to all the kind of red-blooded evangelists who I knew would, have a passion to raise the temperature of evangelism in the city. And so they came from all sorts of different churches. Had about a dozen of these evangelists in the room, and you probably know what that's like. It's a crazy moment, and yet all this energy is all firing off everywhere in the room. Ideas, more ideas than you can handle. But out of that's come some real great collaboration across churches, because we've 2 years running. We've done a 4 points campaign. So this is the 4 points here on my wristband. And with banners, with bus advertising, with all sorts of other, with little tiny tracts that people carry, and based around the Easter service, which we say, look, all you need to do is preach the gospel in your Easter service. Use the 4 points as a build-up to that. So we've equipped people from all churches across the region how to share their faith, how to tell their story, how to use the 4 points as a way of doing that. And because of the profile of the 4 points in the city in the month building up to Easter Sunday, it's been a really easy conversation. Hey, those things on the buses, do you know what they mean? Here, I've got them on my wrist. Hey, why don't you come to the Easter service with us? So it's been really simple, relatively low cost. And we've had, 50 or 60 churches last year and a few more this year buy into that. And that's been a very simple way of serving the city through an initiative by bringing evangelists together from different churches and then collaborating across the churches on a simple evangelistic strategy. Those would be a couple of examples.
It's fantastic. Thanks.
Man, I love the magnetic pull of something like that, because it's so useful for everybody, but it creates all that common language and the experience and the win that you can experience together. And that's a really smart idea. And I think we might have to figure out if we can steal that. That's pretty good.
The other great thing about it, of course, is there's no sense of competition. Because every church is running their own service. There's no big crusade and who's going to get the converts. It's like you do your own thing. You do how you want to do it. Just make use of the resource.
Yeah,
love that. Nick, we've been hanging out today and catching up a little bit. And one of the things that I admired about what I saw from you when we were in Liverpool last year, and then just kind of following what you're doing, and then talking more today, is that you've been consistently handing off ministry for a long time. It seems like that's been a real intention of yours, is to do the handoff. And I know that's not always easy to do. Some people, I think, it's more natural for than others. But talk to us about the importance of that and how you see that in the overall work of city reaching. Not only where are you in that process and how's that been an experience for you, but also how should we be thinking about the principle behind that, and what do we learn from it?
I think it's a difficult one because every context is different. Every church is different. Every ministry is different. So I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all way of doing this or even the right timing to do it. But I can only speak from my own experience, which was that as I was coming into my mid to late 50s, I realized that I was starting to be less in touch with the university student age group that were coming into the church. They were starting to speak a language that I thought I understood it, but I wasn't quite sure that I was on the same wavelength. And I thought, I wonder if this is a sign that we need a younger senior pastor. And so that started the ball rolling. And myself and my co-pastor were able to quickly identify the person we thought would be perfect for the job. He'd been in the church. So growing new leaders from within bypasses all sorts of hassle. And I think most of the hires that we have made that have been from outside are the ones that have gone wrong. The ones we've grown from within have just been brilliant. So we prepared John to take over the church 4 years after we first identified him. So it was a long preparation period. He was a full-time teacher. He went part-time and then eventually went full-time a year on staff before he took over the role. Most of my grieving, and there was a grieving process, was done in that 4-year period. And with the trustee board who were trying to help us handle the whole process, there were a couple of moments, I have to be honest, where I had a few hissy fits. I had to push back on them. I said, look, hang on, I want to do this in my own time. Don't push me. Okay, so there was the emotional challenges of doing that, but I knew it was right. And by the time we got to handing on to John, it was the easiest thing in the world to do. We literally had a baton from a relay race, which with the name of the church engraved on it, and we literally handed it on to John to say, "This is, you are now in charge." And it's worked really well because he held me in high esteem. He respected me greatly. He didn't need me to leave the church for him to lead. He was confident to lead me in the church, which was a big thing for me because they were my family. We'd planted the church from scratch. We knew people. A lot of the people we'd known as babies were now adults, etc., etc. And so he was gracious to say, "No, we'd love you to stay in the church." For my part was to continually big him up, say, "John's doing a fantastic job. He's made a great decision. Wasn't that a fantastic preach?" And just make sure everybody was 100% behind him. I may have had a few occasional private doubts about stuff that he did. I would never voice them publicly. And overall, I think he did a very good job. And we've got new leaders now, 2 years ago, who are also grown from within. I think they're fantastic. They're leading as a couple, these guys, which I think is going to be great for the church. And so I think it's the mutual respect, the honoring that comes with that. And, occasionally I still get a shout out while I'm sitting in a pew, well, it's a chair. And somebody will say, "Oh, yeah, we remember when, Nick and Jenny led the church and they had every member of the church around their table on a Sunday." And, just the odd things that make you feel, "Okay, I haven't been completely forgotten." But I play no active role in the leadership of the church other than leading a couple of micro churches, which is a bit of a new venture. I think I've offered myself to the leadership of Frontline as their R&D department. Let's try a few things out, see what works. So missional communities, we had a good 10 years of that. Stuff needed to change. Currently got life groups, and I think, well, let me try some micro churches, see what happens. And so Jenny and I have had the joy of planting and leading a couple of micro churches, hopefully a couple more later this year, which keeps me connected to the grassroots. I don't lose touch with what it feels like to wrestle for a soul in prayer, or to pour out your heart to someone who's just come to faith and has brought so much baggage with them, and to think, how can we build something that multiplies quickly and easily? How can we use it as a tool to disciple people really well? And how can we raise leaders through that mechanism? So, they give me the freedom to do that, even though it doesn't quite fit their model. And my part, I try and keep that thing connected to the main church as well. So it works because of the honoring, it works because of the respect, it works because of the right timing. One of the things I knew that I maybe knew the time was right was, in retrospect, I realized that when I stopped leading, it was like my relational, spiritual capital in the bank was down to zero. And it wasn't that there were problems, it wasn't that anyone didn't like me, it wasn't that they wanted to get rid of me at all. But I knew I had made so many big asks over the years, and you can only do that so many times before, okay, here goes Nick, he's got another great vision, what's he going to ask us to do this time? And you run out of the capital in the bank to do that. And I only realized that in retrospect. But what was amazing was, John comes in to lead the church. He has a full bank account. He gets to start with, he can do whatever he wants. And when I move on to start leading in Kairos Connection and City Reaching, suddenly I've got a full bank account again. This is amazing. So that kind of retrospective realization helped me be sure that the timing was right.
When we were participating in the Liverpool, in the City Reaching Summit, something that I noticed was that I knew you were the person that was sort of the ringleader and had ultimately initiated that whole experience, but it wasn't obvious from the front the whole time at all. And so it seems like your philosophy of handing off in your local church context has also really spilled out to the way you lead your network efforts and the city reaching efforts. And so I'm just kind of curious, like, how do you see that example is starting to take root of, because it's a different mentality, right? There's like spotlight leadership, and then there's more kind of out of the spotlight leadership, which feels like that's the tack you're taking even now in the city reaching stuff.
I think that's true. And I nearly always think there's somebody else in the room that's smarter than me. So why not give them the platform? And if I can I think of myself primarily as a networker, as a builder, as a vision caster, but I don't need to be in the spotlight. And so I can do all of that behind the scenes. And in fact, if I do start to get in the spotlight, I often feel I get in the way. So I would like to make sure that other people are, taking the stage when they need to. And my goal is to get an outcome from all of that. And if I can get the outcome by giving other people the platform, then that's a win for me. I feel great about that. So I'm going to hope, and I think it's true to say, I'm not ego-driven. I'm not looking to be a celebrity leader. I'm not looking to be on the front pages of the biggest Christian magazine. I'm not trying to be a household name. I have an outcome in mind, which is, complete the Great Commission, prepare the bride of Christ, see Jesus come back. That's we get that outcome, I can die happy. And who's on the stage really doesn't matter. So yes, handing off whenever I think there's someone better able than me to deliver something, and behind the scenes try and make sure that we're all moving together towards a shared outcome.
It seems like that's, sometimes you look at front spotlight leadership and think that's the ultimate leadership, but it seems to me that the approach you're taking is the ultimate leadership because it thinks about the future. And if you're spotlighting other leaders, then it's not so dependent on you. And I think that's one of the things we're learning about, even as we're looking at what's happening with DMM, what's happening with microchurch, is that it's that light load leader, that shared leadership. It's like that just is more sustainable. And anyways, I'm excited of what's happening there, and I think it's a great example. Thanks for sharing that.
And definitely team leadership is the way forward. None of us have got all the gifts, but between us, we've probably got most of them. So let's share our giftings with each other and for the common cause that we work together for. And even within the microchurches, within the first year or so, I'm identifying the leaders who are going to take on those microchurches as we plant new ones. I'm thinking about that as well. So it's always about, because it's about multiplication. It's about multiplying disciples, leaders, and churches. And so to do that, you have to get out of the way. You can't be the bottleneck.
I think, Nick, as you're saying that, what comes to mind is if there's a wisdom or a lesson that we can hear from you and your story of, as you progress in your calling and clarity in calling, and you said outcome, which I love that term, but I also just think like vision, like God's given you a vision and you're taking steps along towards that vision, but clarity in calling, I heard, and then clarity in gifting, like you're operating within your gifting. And I just want to repeat what you said because I think it's so helpful to catch it. Is there's like the term kingdom economy came to mind when you said your capital was down, but you handed off leadership. And when you handed off leadership, somehow with no capital, you handed over a ton of capital. Yep. Like he had a ton of capital, and then God's ushering you into the next. And so you went from zero in one sense, but then you got two full tanks somehow when you come out of that. Like I just think there's a beautiful picture in that, and a lesson for, regardless of if you're listening to this, where you're at in your leadership journey, whether you're early, middle, or late in it. Like that's just gold, I think, and such a wonderful example. So
thank you. Yeah,
thank you.
I mean, I'm never more happier than when someone else is taking the lead.
Well, that's funny from a lot of angles, and good, valuable. So I've got one more question, but I want to sneak in an additional one that we didn't talk about. Just as listening to you and Gabe talk just now, you shared about microchurches, and that kind of be the R&D of your church, and clearly you've got vision for that, and you're trying new things and seeing God move in some new ways. One of the things that we're seeing here in Portland, particularly with Multiply PDX, is that we've gotten to link arms even together with a group of leaders that are not leading the same kinds of ministries. And so we've got small churches, micro churches, discipleship movement kind of models and experiments, large churches, mid-sized churches, planting churches, long-established churches. Like we've got all kinds that are trying to partner together. Outside of your kind of home church example, how are you seeing the partnership and the shared kind of you used partnership or collaboration in your region? of those different kinds of methodologies and church expressions?
I think, if I'm honest, that's something we're still working on.
Sure.
But let me comment on where I was just a week ago, or less than a week, in Charlotte. I was with their church planting network. And before the big gathering where everyone came around the table together, we had a microchurch discussion with practitioners. And what was clear for me was that there was there had been suspicion by the big churches towards these renegades doing their thing over here. And there was hurt on the part of the microchurch leaders who had felt somehow excluded from or rejected by, or even in a kind of hostile way against the big church model. So there was these barriers that were very clear as people were talking. And I felt what was great was that they came together to talk about, how could we connect with each other in the microchurch world, or the small church, DMM, whatever kind of those small multiplying missional expressions of church, whatever you want to call them. How could we support one another in that? Because they're all very isolated, and the same would be true in the UK. So one of the other branches of Charis Connection in the UK is a microchurch network that we're starting to build nationally, and which the network that I'm trying to build locally would ultimately be a part of. But also, when it came to the main gathering at lunchtime, they brought the microchurch planters into the room, and there was a public honoring of those microchurch planters.
That's good.
We need you guys. We need you in the conversation. We need you in the discussion. And we're sorry if that you felt excluded, or there was a real, I would say, first steps towards reconciliation where needed and collaboration where possible, so that ultimately, because if in my mind, you see, this 1 in 1,000 idea, one missional expression of church for every 1,000 people, the numbers are not that important, but it's the saturation level that's important. Then we're never going to do that by legacy churches planting legacy churches. We've got to have all sorts of different shapes and sizes of church, punctuating and permeating all the nooks and crannies of our city, whether they be geographical, whether they be demographic, whether they be, workplace. One of the guys in my microchurch has just started an alpha course in his workplace, and there's only 8 of them in the architect's practice. 2 of them are on the alpha course, and they're starting to come to some of our microchurch stuff now. It's super exciting to see, the gospel penetrating workplace here, and apps that, who knows what could end up being planted in that workplace. So we need all of these expressions, and we need to be in the room to be understanding one another and figuring out what does collaboration look like, and how can we, because I think, the big churches have most of the resource, the micro churches have very little. So I think it's on the big churches to say, how can we support you? How can we resource you? And how can you help inform us in what we're doing for the greater good of the city of Portland? And so I think there's a two-way traffic there, which I think is going to be important. And that's the message I'm giving to the guys in Liverpool.
I love that, and that's so well said. And so I hope we catch that and lean into that, embody that, learn from that, because there's just like the not to project this on too many people, but I can remember being in that stage of my own development as a leader and thinking, if I can just find the methodology that's the right one and refine it and perfect it, and then just stay in it. And I think what the story you just told is one of learning of different experiences and people at different stages, and taking different risks and seeing God work in different ways. And we're all learning from each other, and we're not trying to find like that somehow secret strategy or method that's actually not spirit empowered, and it's just humanly created, and that's a big danger. So
can I just make one other comment on collaboration before we move on? Because the other part that's been really important for us in Liverpool is to try and bridge the gulf between the white and the black churches.
Great.
So we have a ton of black churches, particularly sprung up in the last 10 years. Many of them are Nigerian. And because most of them are first generation, they've kind of created silos, and we have done nothing to break those barriers down. We've done nothing to, we're the ones empowered to do so, but we have failed them in that respect as bigger white, more longer established white churches. So, I mean, when I say white, I mean majority white. I mean,
Sure.
our frontline church is a quarter ethnic minority, so it's not all white, but you know what I mean. So we've spent the last 5 years really trying to break those barriers down and say, look, we're really sorry. We need you. We want you. You bring so much to the table. They're mainly black Pentecostal churches. You know, you understand about prayer and fasting. You understand about, you know, extended worship times. You understand about, you know, preaching the gospel unapologetically. There's all sorts of stuff that you've got that we need.
Yeah.
And so as we've said that, and they've begun to sort of lower some of the barriers, we've been able to build a lot of those bridges, and now they're in the mainstream conversation. But one of the things that really both hurt me, humbled me, and just made me astonished was that one of the ways we've been trying to build those bridges and break down barriers is to have people in our home. So Jenny and I would invite some of these pastors round for meals. And one of them, who's been in the city, probably one of the longer established Nigerian-led churches, probably for 25 years. And as they sat round the table, they said, this is the first time I have ever been invited into another pastor's home in 25 years. You know, that absolutely broke my heart.
Yeah.
And just thought, oh my God, you know, the levels of rejection and, you know, alienation that they must feel at our hands, you know, because it's in our power to do something about that. And I just feel like, you know, there's some amazing worship leaders coming out of these churches. There's some amazing evangelists coming out of these churches, and we need them in the body of Christ in Liverpool. So I think that's the other thing I would say on the collaborative story is that we've worked hard at, and it's such a joy to experience.
Thanks for being, thanks for sharing that and for being an example, because that's, I go back to you said how many churches are there in Liverpool, right? It's like one, and that's one that's off the radar, right? For your church, at least, that was out of the sight lines. And so for you to take that, to own that and take that initiative and reach out, and that's beautiful. Thank you. So I got maybe one more question for you, and then want to hear more about what you're leading specifically in this next season. But one of the things, and you know this, is that for us in America, we look at the UK and at Western Europe, and it's almost cliche at this point to say, oh, that's us in 10 years. Like, you're 10 years down the road, culturally speaking, and the challenges that culture presents to the gospel and the opportunities that the culture presents to the gospel. Can you just maybe pick one or two, kind of what's the newest thing that you're trying to, I don't know, like interpret or exegete culture, decode in some way? And what's that like for you that we could possibly learn from here in the Northwest?
I've thought a lot about this since I've been on my trip to the US, which is nearly 2 weeks now. And observing, listening, watching. And what I think about the Pacific Northwest is that the gap, I think, is closing. I don't think the gap, say, compare Portland with Liverpool, the gap is not as big as it used to be. Partly because it's like there's like a increasing secularization, breakdown of society, family structures, society beginning to fall apart. All of the problems that come with that secularization. We're kind of down the other side of that now. In other words, I think we've probably moved from post-Christian to pre-Christian. In other words, the secular experiment is seen to be bankrupt, and nobody believes in the secular experiment anymore. And alongside that, Christianity is becoming far more an acceptable topic of conversation. It's no longer, whoa, we don't, that's fine for you. Don't bring it into our world. It's kind of, you use the word curiosity. I would say there is massive curiosity in the UK at the moment. We're experiencing that in the micro churches that we're leading. We're seeing that in our church, just as you are.
What does that look like? So, I'm just picturing your house, a micro church. People are in your home, so they know they're coming into some kind of a religious or spiritual conversation or context. What have you noticed that has shifted? That there's an openness or more curiosity that is different than 10 years ago, 5 years ago?
Well, let me first of all say that one of the main tools that we've been using, Jenny and I have been using it for the last 15, 20 years in our home, is the Alpha course.
Okay.
And I know that's familiar ground to you guys here, maybe not be as predominant as it is in the UK. But let me just go off on a slight side tangent on the Alpha course for a moment, then I'll come back to your question. There's something about the Alpha course that I think is a phenomenon. It's not just they've done a good course and people are using it. There's something about it which, I don't know, it's got the hand of God on it.
Yeah.
You can't explain what's happening just through the fact they invested a lot of money, created something really good. It's in 142 countries, 112 languages. There's 30 million people around the world have been through an Alpha course. 2 million of those alone are in the UK. That means that of the adult population, that's about 5% of the adult population in the UK have done an Alpha course, which is incredible.
Yeah.
And the Alpha calculate now that of those who understand the branding, they recognize the branding, even if they don't know what it is, who have never been invited to an Alpha course, but who would say yes if they were invited to an Alpha course.
Yeah.
They have calculated there's about 4 million people in the UK who would say yes to Alpha if they were invited.
Wow.
That's, to me, massive increase in curiosity.
Yes, yes.
And we've seen this in our own microchurch expression. So let me just tell you one story. So many of the Alpha courses, they back up on each other because they kind of one fuels the next one. And it's a great way I think it's a fantastic way of starting microchurches, is to run an Alpha course. But one of the guys, a couple who got saved in an Alpha course 2.5 years ago, they live on the other side of the water from us, from Liverpool across the Mersey into the Wirral. And they rang us up one day. They got saved. They're doing great. And they said, hey, Nick, we've got a whole bunch of our friends who are curious about what's happened to us. Would you run an Alpha course for them? I said, well, yes, but why don't you run one?
Why don't you?
we'll help you. Which is what we do. And one of these couples, who's got no church background whatsoever, he got to the second film. We call them Alpha Film Nights rather than Alpha Course because it's easier to talk about that way. People aren't that fussed about courses, but film nights, yeah, that sounds good. And particularly when you say, just come to the first one, see if you like it, and if you do, you can come again. So this couple, lovely couple, no Christian background, on the second film said, which is the first one's like, Christianity true, is it true, is it relevant, or is it boring? And on the second one is, who is Jesus? At the end of the film, he just said, you know what? This is just obvious. Why doesn't everybody believe this? Yes, indeed. Yeah. Why doesn't everybody believe it? That's the kind of level of spiritual openness that we're seeing. Right. And the curiosity. It's really easy to invite people to Alpha. I mean, there's plenty of alternatives to Alpha. I just don't happen to know a better one. So we use it all the time.
That's great.
And another guy who got saved on an Alpha course last year in our home he brought his dad to an Alpha course this year in our home. And he got saved last year. His dad got saved this year, and now we're planting an Alpha course into their home. It is in a separate part of Liverpool. In the home, and they've already had one session with another girl who got saved last year. Brought 3 guests to it. There's 4 guests. There's others who want to come. We're just praying that we're able to plant a microchurch out of that Alpha course. And one of the beauties of that is that the Alpha course sets the tone for food, community, discussion, prayer. It just flows seamlessly into microchurch life.
Yes.
And so it feels like a really easy way to plant new stuff. Now, I'm sure it won't work for everyone or everywhere, but it's the best thing we've found, and we love doing it. We've seen Alpha, I mean, dozens and dozens of times, the films. Jenny and I still get something out of it every time we watch it. So, I'm still learning and growing through Alpha, so I'm sure other people can too. And it's a really easy invitation.
It is, yeah.
If people are open and curious, they'll come.
You know, what's exciting to me about what you just shared about the curiosity is that you've been in that for a little bit, and for us, I think it's just starting to happen in our city. And Ed Stetzer was just here, and he pointed this out, and a bunch of our eyeballs got big when he started sharing some statistics about what Portlanders say they're curious about, and that their curiosity about Jesus is something specific that they're talking about. There's a piece of me that goes, I wonder how long that trend is going to last. Mm-hmm. What's exciting to me is to hear you talk about how it's still enduring in the UK, and it tends to be that you're leading us, in terms of those trends. So that's exciting to think that God's doing something more enduring, and we should act as if it's going to continue and be bold.
Let me give you another stat. It just blows my mind. In the last 12 months, the sales of Bibles in the UK have gone up by 134%. Wow. That is a phenomenon. Wow. And it just shows this incredible curiosity about Jesus and the Bible. And instead of there being, 10, 15 years ago, you'd have got this resistance to talking about Jesus, a resistance to the Bible, a resistance to the idea of being part or involved in church because of an inherited sort of immunization against it through previous experiences. Now we're in this, what feels much more like a pre-Christian missionary culture where there's wide openness to the gospel. So do you know what? I feel like I've been waiting for this all my life.
Right, yeah.
I'm so glad I'm still alive while it's happening because I can be part of it.
Well, it's so interesting. Like, just personally, like we were called to Portland almost 20 years ago, and to see the movement in just, I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and then that's the only two places I've lived, and to watch the needle move in exactly what you're saying to, like a resistance. And so I pastored a church that was 2 blocks away from a major high school in Portland. Was there for 17 years, and just the high school response was like pretty resistant. Like, Christians are weirdos, to like, what is that building? I just want to go in and see. And so, we lamented for so long that the name of Jesus wasn't known. But then all of a sudden it felt like I know it wasn't, but it felt like almost overnight that became a plus, because what you just described as an openness or a curiosity to, I don't have a preconceived idea of who Jesus is or isn't. And you start telling stories about him, and I'm interested. I want to know more. And like you described the wonderful story of like, isn't this obvious? Like, I love that. It's great. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Can you tell us more about like what you're involved in now and what God's calling you to now, and maybe what some opportunities are for more of us in the Pacific Northwest to be a part of what you're doing and to support you?
Thank you, Tim. That's kind of you to ask. I feel like I'm super excited about City Reaching, and what I do nationally with City Reaching is just reflected on what I do locally with City Reaching. And even what I do with the microchurch, it's like, okay, how can we fill more spaces with the gospel? Yeah. I think what I'm seeing is that, having been running with this 3 to 4 years, we've built some really good partnerships, including with the wonderful Jeff Vanderstelt just up the road, and other people who have been very supportive of what we're doing. That I've probably taken created the momentum towards City Reaching as far as I probably can with my capacity, energy, and age, to be honest. And so I'm asking, what will it do to take it to the next level with stronger teams, more cities, greater engagement, more measurables, greater impact, and better shared learning across the nation. So I am looking for partners partners in all sorts of ways. I mean, one of the reasons I'm here in the US for these 2 weeks is because gospel saturation is a normal language for you guys. It's foreign language in the UK. I'm trying to find out what God's already doing here, hence visiting Atlanta and Charlotte, Greenville, and now Portland. So partnership can work in many different ways. But I'm also trying to prepare for the next director for City Reaching to take over. I'd like to have them, and I'd love to be in an overlap season with them for a year or two before I, fully hand that on. But I need to raise the funds for that because we're operating on a zero budget. Everything's done on goodwill, free will, spare time, and because people have a passion for what we're doing. So I don't get paid for what I do, and neither do any of the leaders in the cities that we're working with. So just to try and raise up funds for a part-time director for City Reaching to take it to that next level, I would stay fully involved. You can't keep me away, but it needs the energy of a younger person with more time available, greater capacity to take it to the next level. So if I'm just completely honest, that's one of the aspects of partnership I'd love to pursue. If anybody wants to come and check out what we're doing, they're welcome to join us in October, either the 12th, 13th in Bristol or the 15th, 16th in Liverpool, to get a feel for what's going on. I'm
going to vote for Liverpool. Just such a cool city. Voting for Liverpool.
Well, having lived in both cities, Bristol for 18 years and Liverpool for 35 years, I recommend them both. But I appreciate Liverpool has a special place for me. I often call it the promised land. But yeah, if anybody wanted to come and just check it out and say, like, is this something we'd like to partner with in any way, we'd certainly welcome them.
And how would people connect with you, Nick? What kind of step or what contact info or website or what would you point them to?
Well, if you want to go and just get a sort of summary of what City Reaching is about, you can go on to the kairosconnection.org website /City Reaching. We'll put the address up on the end of this podcast, and also my email, nick@kairosconnection.org. Both totally fine to contact in either way.
Great.
Nick, thank you so much for spending time with us, not only today on this podcast, but also in our city right now. And we know you're making an investment in what we're doing here now, and we really appreciate that. But thank you for what you're doing in the UK. We'll be praying that God opens the doors wider and wider.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to be with you both. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Jesus in the Upper Left. We want to ask you a quick favor. Would you please subscribe so you don't miss a single episode, and share with those that are in your life that might benefit from the content. Hit the notifications button, rate and review, of course, and then head on over to upperleftshow.com where you can find bonus content, opportunities to connect with those around the city that are doing similar work as you, resources to help you, and just a way to connect to the community. We hope to see you again next time.